The first time I was invited to dinner with her family, I thought it meant something, like a milestone, one of those moments you imagine in slow motion, with faint piano music playing in the background. I'd even ironed my shirt twice, which for me was the equivalent of proposing marriage. Her house sat on a hill so polished it looked like it came with its own PR agent. The driveway was long, lined with lights that didn't just illuminate, they judged. I parked my old sedan carefully, as if one wrong angle would alert security. My reflection in their front window looked more underdog in a feel-good movie than future son-in-law. When her mother opened the door, her smile was perfect, like a chandelier made of teeth. "You must be the young man," she said, "the way one might say, you must be the new dishwasher." I tried to charm my way through the tension, complimented the house, the decor, the garden that looked like it had its own gardeners, but every response was smooth and thin, like ice about to crack. Her father sat at the head of the table, a man with salt and pepper hair and a watch that probably cost more than my car's engine. He didn't ask what I did for a living, he asked what I planned to do. Subtle difference, but the kind that made my stomach twist. "I'm still figuring things out," I said, with a laugh too light to hide the truth. He nodded, as though confirming a pre-existing theory. "Ambition is important," he replied. "Our daughter has always aimed high." Ah, there it was, the polite way of saying I wasn't high enough. Dinner itself was an Olympic event of small talk. I tried to contribute stories, but somehow every topic turned into a group project I wasn't invited to join. I complimented the roast. Her mother mentioned their chef's French training. I praised the art on the wall. Her father explained it was a limited edition piece, not really available anymore. I laughed at my own bad luck. They smiled as if I'd made a fascinating point about poverty. Halfway through the meal, I realized I was sweating not just from nerves, but from the sheer pressure of maintaining dignity, while cutting steak that cost more than a week's groceries. My napkin felt like a flag of surrender. Her brother was the wild card, younger, smug, dressed like a man auditioning for the role of entitled son number 2. He smirked every time I spoke, especially when I mentioned my part-time job. I could practically hear his thoughts. This guy thinks he belongs here. But the real kicker came later. Her father poured himself another glass of wine and said, "So what exactly is your plan?" "Plan," I repeated, trying not to sound like I'd just been asked to present a TED Talk. "Yes," he said, "you seem like a spirited young man. But we'd hate to see our daughter struggle." I smiled politely, but inside, a small spark lit up, the kind that starts quiet revolutions. "I don't plan to struggle," I said softly. He gave me a kind look, the kind you reserve for children who say they want to be astronauts. Her mother placed her fork down gently. "We just want her to have stability," she said, and I, apparently, was the earthquake. The rest of the night blurred into laughter I didn't share, and wine I didn't enjoy. By dessert, I'd realized I was less a guest, and more a background character in their family play, a scene labeled the wrong kind of boyfriend. As we left, her father shook my hand. "Good to meet you," he said, his tone smooth as glass. "I'm sure you'll find your path." Translation, just not with our daughter. In the car, I tried to joke about it. "Well, that went great. No one threw breadsticks at me," she laughed weakly. "They're just protective, of course, like a security system programmed to detect low income." I looked out the window as we drove down their perfect hill, streetlights streaking across the windshield. Somewhere between pride and heartbreak, I made a quiet promise to myself. If I couldn't be good enough for their family, I'd become someone they couldn't ignore. I didn't know how yet, but I knew I'd start by proving that sometimes the underdog doesn't just bark, he builds his own house. The next morning, I woke up to the taste of unsaid words. You know, that faint bitterness that lingers after pretending everything's fine. It was that, but with the aftertaste of overcooked politeness. She texted me around noon. "They liked you." I stared at the screen for a long moment. I almost laughed out loud. Liked was a generous word. Tolerated was closer to the truth. Still, I typed back something neutral, because hope, like bad coffee, keeps you going longer than it should. Over the next few weeks, I noticed a shift, subtle at first. She became careful. The way she spoke about her family, the pauses before she mentioned my name, the growing list of reasons why she couldn't hang out, each one perfectly logical, perfectly hollow. One evening, as we sat in her car outside my apartment, she said, "It's just complicated." Complicated, I repeated. Like calculus or like us? She smiled faintly, but her eyes were somewhere else. "They think we're too different," she admitted. "You're still figuring things out, and they just worry that I'm not good enough." I finished for her. Silence filled the car, thick and polite, like the dinner all over again. The truth is, she wasn't cruel. She was kind in the way people are when they're choosing comfort over courage. She didn't want to hurt me. She just didn't want to fight for me either. A week later, she called. Her voice was gentle, rehearsed. "I just think we're at different points in life." I told her I understood. Because what else do you say when the real answer is, "I'll never fit into your family's frame"? When the call ended, I just sat there, phone still in hand, watching the screen fade to black like the credits of a film that didn't deserve a sequel. Funny thing about heartbreak, it doesn't break evenly. Part of you feels empty, and part of you feels unreasonably alive, like every nerve just discovered caffeine. I remember walking outside that night, hands in my pockets, breathing in air that suddenly felt colder but clearer. That was the night I stopped imagining being enough for someone else's story. I started thinking about writing my own. The next few months were humbling. My job at the copy shop barely paid rent, and the Wi-Fi was allergic to productivity. But between printing flyers and fixing paper jams, I started tinkering with an idea. A tiny, stupid idea. Something about helping small local stores sell online because I'd seen how many of them struggled. I didn't have money, or connections, or a last name that opened doors. What I had was a second-hand laptop, a caffeine addiction, and spite. Oh sweet, renewable spite, the most underrated source of energy known to humankind. There were nights when I'd stay up until 3 a.m., typing like my keyboard owed me an apology. Sometimes I'd laugh out loud at my own ambition. I mean, who was I kidding? I was building a business out of thin air and noodles. But other times, when the code finally ran, or a prototype finally worked, I'd feel something close to magic. Her face would cross my mind then, not in bitterness, but as motivation. Somewhere in that mansion, her family probably sat under perfect lighting, discussing quarterly returns. And here I was, counting coins for ramen. But at least those coins were mine. I didn't know it yet, but I was laying the foundation of everything that would follow. The nights, the failures, the caffeine, the ridiculous persistence. It all became the quiet prelude to something real. There's a strange peace in being underestimated. It gives you freedom. No one expects you to win, so every small success feels like a private rebellion. Still, I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt. Some nights I'd scroll through social media, see her smiling at events, her family glowing around her, and I'd whisper a joke to myself, "Hey, at least I'm saving money on expensive dinners." I smiled. But it wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind of smile people wear when they're rebuilding from rubble, pretending it's a scenic view. Then, one night, as I stared at my flickering screen, I remembered her father's words. "We'd hate to see our daughter struggle." I leaned back in my chair, cracked my neck, and murmured to no one in particular, "Don't worry, she won't, and neither would I." Heartbreak is an underrated business coach. It teaches you discipline through sleepless nights, budgeting through heartbreak dinners, and resilience through rejection that comes gift-wrapped in politeness. The weeks after the breakup blurred into a montage of caffeine, code, and my days began with the sound of a sputtering coffee maker and ended with the glow of my laptop, my two most loyal companions. Rent was late, meals were minimal, and my social life was mostly arguing with error messages. But strangely, I felt awake. Every no from life turned into another line of code, another draft, another test. I wasn't just building a product, I was building a version of myself that didn't need anyone's permission to exist. Still, there were moments when doubt crept in, uninvited. The kind that whispers at 2 a.m. What if her father was right? On those nights I'd close my laptop and stare at the ceiling. Sometimes I'd even laugh quietly, half at the absurdity of it all, half at my own stubbornness. I'd imagine their dining table again, all polished and perfect, and think, if I ever make it, I'm buying a table twice that size, just so I can eat instant noodles in peace. Then I'd get back to work. My project, at that point, still just a rough idea called Shoplinker, started small. A website builder for mom-and-pop stores that couldn't afford fancy e-commerce platforms. It was glitchy, slow, and occasionally forgot what it was supposed to do, but it had heart. I'd walk into local bakeries and barber shops, pitch the idea with more enthusiasm than sense, and sometimes, someone would say yes. One bakery owner, Mrs. Hahn, a retired math teacher, became my first real client. She handed me an envelope of cash because, as she said, I don't trust online payment nonsense, and said, don't make it pretty, just make it work. I did, barely. But when her first online order came through, she called me, laughing like a kid. Someone just bought 3 loaves of bread from another city. That was the moment I realized, maybe I was good at this. Soon word spread, mostly through gossip and gratitude. I wasn't making much, but I was building momentum. My life had gone from heartbreak to hustle in under a year, and I was starting to taste something new, possibility. And then, one afternoon, I ran into her. It was at a local cafe, the kind with exposed brick walls and overpriced latte. She looked exactly the same, maybe even better. Polished, calm, radiant. She was with her mother. They were laughing about something, the kind of easy laughter that used to come from us. She noticed me before I could pretend not to notice her. Our eyes met, and for a second time hiccuped. Hey, she said, with that same familiar softness. Hey, I echoed, my voice steadier than I felt. Her mother turned, and I saw the brief flicker of recognition, the split second where politeness battles discomfort. Oh, she said, with a tight smile. It's you. Yes, I replied, smiling politely. Still me. We exchanged small talk, what we'd been up to, how work was going, all the social scripts we learned to perform when we already said the words that ended everything. When her mother asked, and what are you doing now? I could tell she expected something safe and unimpressive. So I told her the truth. I'm building a company. There was a small pause, a polite blink. Oh, that's nice. The conversation ended soon after. They left with smiles. I left with fire. Not anger, motivation. Because somewhere between the espresso machine and the door, I realized something. I didn't need to change for anyone's approval. I just needed to grow so much they couldn't see me the same way again. I went home that evening, made instant noodles for dinner, extra egg, because I was feeling fancy, and opened my laptop like it was a declaration of war. That night, I wrote a new mission statement for Shoplinker, to make small dreams visible to the big world. It wasn't just about code anymore. It was about every person who'd ever been told they weren't enough. Funny how heartbreak, when handled correctly, starts to look a lot like ambition in disguise. The basement I rented that year was technically described as semi-furnished. What that really meant was it came with a chair that squeaked, a table that wobbled, and a mysterious smell that changed with the weather. But it also came with something priceless: silence. The kind of silence that let me build. I'd wake up every day to the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of someone else's alarm clock upstairs. My ceiling was literally another man's floor, which felt symbolic in ways I tried not to think about. Still, I was alive, caffeinated, and, most importantly, free. Freedom, it turns out, tastes a lot like instant noodles and burnt toast. I worked long hours, days blurred into nights, nights into caffeine hallucinations. My laptop became both my confessional and my executioner. I'd whisper to it like it was a friend. Just one more line of code, buddy, then we'll sleep. Spoiler, we never slept. When money ran out, I started freelancing on the side, designing logos, fixing bugs, writing taglines for people who wanted their lemonade stands to sound like empires. I learned more in those nights than 4 years of school ever taught me. Mostly about survival, but occasionally about marketing. Every few weeks I'd get an email from someone saying, "I heard you helped that bakery go online. Can you do that for us?" And just like that, Shoplinker began to crawl from dream to reality. My friends thought I was losing it. One of them, Rafi, came over one evening with pizza and pity. "Brock," he said, looking around the cluttered space, "you're living like a startup founder in a documentary, except without the success montage." I laughed, wiping pizza grease off my keyboard. "Give it time. I'm still in the suffering for art part." He nodded thoughtfully. "Yeah, but maybe get a chair that doesn't sound like it's begging for mercy." He wasn't wrong. Still, beneath the exhaustion and Roman-fueled delusion, I felt alive. Every tiny victory, a client's order, a new feature that didn't crash, a stranger's kind review, was oxygen. But success, even the small kind, attracts chaos. One morning, as I was trying to push a software update, my laptop froze, hummed twice, and then went dark. Just like that black screen, no heartbeat. For a minute, I stared at it in disbelief. Then I laughed, because the alternative was crying, and crying takes too much energy. I spent the next 2 days haunting repair shops until one guy, wearing headphones and existential despair, fixed it for half my rent money. Worth it. By the time Shoplinker hit its 1-year mark, I had 10 active clients and a savings account that was no longer a joke. I still lived in that basement, but now the space looked different, less like failure, more like incubation. One evening, I got an email from a small fashion brand asking for a meeting. They'd seen my work online and wanted to discuss collaboration. I wore my least wrinkled shirt, borrowed a friend's blazer, and took the bus across town. The meeting was in a sleek glass office that smelled faintly of success and expensive perfume. The founder, a woman in her 30s named Elise, looked at my proposal and said, "This is clever. You're not just selling tools, you're selling belief." That sentence hit me harder than I expected. Belief that was the thing I'd been missing all those years. Not from myself, but from the people who once looked me in the eye and seen nothing worth investing in. As I left that meeting, walking past polished cars and designer suits, I smiled to myself, not out of arrogance, but relief. I wasn't trying to prove them wrong anymore. I was simply proving me right. That night, back in the basement, I celebrated with a can of cheap beer and a playlist called Victory Vibes, sort of. My chair squeaked its usual protest, the laptop hummed, and somewhere between exhaustion and joy, I realized, maybe this was the good part. Not the applause, not the recognition, but this messy, sleepless, noodle-stained stretch of becoming. And in that quiet glow of the screen, I whispered to no one in particular. They said I had no future. Joke's on them. I'm building one right now. Momentum has a strange rhythm. It doesn't arrive with fireworks. It sneaks in like background music, slowly getting louder until you realize you're humming along. Within the next year, Shoplinker stopped being a side project and started becoming a movement. I hired my first intern, though hired might be too formal a word. It was my friend Rafi who agreed to work for coffee, leftover pizza, and the promise of stock options that existed only in my imagination. "Bro," he said one morning, squinting at the analytics dashboard, "I think we're actually, doing it." "Yeah," I said, grinning, "we're accidentally legitimate." By month 18, we'd signed over 100 small businesses, bakers, florists, bookstores, tailors, the kind of people who'd been told you can compete online and then did exactly that. Our platform wasn't flashy, but it worked, and that was enough. I moved out of the basement, not because I'd made it big, but because the landlord discovered my occasional coding had turned into a 24-hour electricity binge. My new apartment had windows, actual sunlight. It felt luxurious, like living inside a metaphor. Of course, success brought its own chaos. Server crashes, bug reports, sleepless nights, caffeine overdoses disguised as productivity. I learned that growth isn't glamorous. It's just chaos in nicer packaging. We started getting attention. A local magazine ran a small feature about the startup helping small shops survive the digital age. The photo they used of me was terrible. I looked like a man who'd just realized the coffee machine was sentient, but it didn't matter. People noticed. Investors started emailing. And then came that message. It was late, maybe 1 a.m. I was reviewing code when a notification popped up on LinkedIn. A new connection request, from her brother. I almost spilled my coffee. The same guy who'd once smirked across that fancy dinner table was now messaging me. His profile photo screamed finance professional, and his message was as polished as his LinkedIn summary. "Hey man, long time no see. I've been following your company. Really impressive stuff. We should catch up sometime." I stared at the message, half amused, half stunned. The universe really had a sense of humor. I didn't reply immediately. I took a deep breath, leaned back, and whispered to myself, "Careful. This is either character development or a setup." Over the next few weeks, the company kept growing. We were onboarding bigger clients, expanding to other cities, and even talking about a rebrand. I started wearing shirts that had buttons on purpose. Life was changing, quietly but surely. Then, one morning, my assistant forwarded me an email. A national business network wanted to feature Shoplinker on their televised segment about rising startups. It wasn't just local anymore, it was the real stage. I said yes before they could change their minds. The day of the filming, I wore a navy suit I'd rented because I wasn't about to spend my first profit on dry cleaning bills. The studio lights were brutal, and the interviewer had that permanent TV smile that looked painful to maintain. "So," she said, "you started all this from a basement." "Technically, it was semi-furnished," I corrected with a grin. The crew laughed. It felt good, like a tiny, well-deserved victory. We wrapped up, they thanked me, and I left the studio walking lighter than air. That evening, as I scrolled through my phone, a new notification popped up. An article titled "From Basement to Boardroom, the Startup Story of Shoplinker." I clicked it open, skimmed the words, and froze. The first comment was from her brother. "Incredible story. Truly inspiring to see how far he's come." No sarcasm, no shade, just respect. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about the quiet satisfaction of growing so much that even those who once doubted, you have to applaud. Still, I couldn't resist sending Rafi a screenshot with the caption, "Plot twist, the villain claps." He replied instantly, "Bro, This movie's getting good. Yeah, it really was. Success doesn't knock. It rings the doorbell, waits exactly 1 second, and then bursts in like it already owns the place. The first time it happened, I was in the middle of a meeting when my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. By the time I checked, my inbox had turned into chaos. Apparently, a celebrity chef had mentioned Shoplinker on a podcast, calling it the app that saved my bakery during lockdown. Overnight, our servers went from manageable traffic to digital stampede. Rafi looked at the analytics and said, "We're trending." I blinked, like on purpose. We spent that night glued to our screens, watching numbers climb faster than my caffeine intake. Orders, sign-ups, messages. It was like watching a dream crash into reality in real time. By sunrise, I was too wired to sleep, too tired to think, and too stunned to complain. That podcast mention changed everything. New clients poured in. Investors wanted meetings. Suddenly, people who'd once ignored my emails were now emailing me first, starting with flattering lines like "I've been following your journey closely," which was a lie, of course, but a polite one, so I let it slide. Within 3 months, Shoplinker moved into an actual office. Not a fancy one, just a modest space with windows that opened, plants that kept dying, and chairs that didn't squeak much. But it was ours. On the first day, I brought in a coffee machine and gave a tiny speech. "This," I said, pointing at the espresso maker, "is the new CEO. Treat it well." Everyone laughed, but deep down, I meant it. That machine had seen things. We hired more people, designers, coders, a marketing lead who wore bright sneakers and believed in buzzwords like synergy. I didn't understand half of what she said, but she seemed confident, and confidence is contagious. Things were moving fast. Too fast, maybe. There were press interviews, partnership proposals, photo shoots where I pretended to look thoughtful while staring out of windows. Somewhere in the chaos, I started to feel the weight of it, the success I'd prayed for now sitting on my shoulders like an overexcited child. But I couldn't slow down, because once the world notices you, it also watches you. And that's when her family reappeared. It started subtly. Her mother sent a connection request on social media, no message, just a digital olive branch with a profile picture that hadn't aged a day. A week later, her father's company reached out for a potential collaboration. Rafi nearly choked on his coffee when he saw the email. "Wait, the family, as in, the you'll never be good enough family." "The very same," I said, staring at the screen. "What are you gonna do?" I took a slow sip of my coffee. "Schedule a meeting." He stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "You're serious?" "Dead serious. If life's offering me poetic symmetry, I'm not saying no." The meeting was set for the following Thursday, in their company's glossy downtown office. I arrived early, this time, in a tailored suit that didn't need an apology. Their receptionist offered me water in a crystal glass. I almost laughed. When her father walked in, I saw the same man who once looked at me like a bad investment. But this time, his handshake was firm, his smile respectful. "I've been hearing a lot about your company," he said. "Good things, I hope," I replied lightly. "All good," he said, nodding. "You've built something impressive." We talked business, partnerships, structures, integrations, logistics, professional, polite, distant. But beneath it all, I could feel the irony shimmering in the air. At one point, he said, "You've done well for yourself." And I smiled. I had excellent motivation. He didn't ask what I meant. He didn't need to. The meeting ended with a handshake and an invitation to dinner, to discuss things further. The phrase was familiar. So was the tone. When I left the building, I caught my reflection in the glass doors. Same eyes, same smirk, just a different man. I texted Rafi, "Guess who's getting invited to dinner again?" he replied. "Full circle, baby. Bring your own steak knife this time." I laughed out loud in the middle of the sidewalk. The universe, I decided, had a wicked sense of humor, and I was finally in on the joke. The invitation came 2 weeks later. Same elegant stationery, same cursive handwriting, same last name embossed in gold. Déjà vu with a twist. This time, I didn't iron my shirt twice. I sent it out for dry cleaning, because that's what people with working air conditioners and employee payrolls do. Rafi insisted on helping me pick an outfit. "You need to look like success, not revenge," he said, rifling through my wardrobe like a fashion therapist. "Can I look like both?" I asked. He grinned. "Ah, a balanced diet of elegance and pettiness. Perfect." The dinner was held at the same mansion, though now it looked smaller. Or maybe I'd grown. My car, a modest but respectable sedan this time, glided up the driveway, and the lights didn't feel like judgment anymore. They felt like applause. When the butler opened the door, he smiled as if he actually meant it. Her mother appeared, still glowing, still poised, still a walking luxury brand. "It's been so long," she said warmly. "Yes," I replied. "A lifetime, give or take a few late nights." Inside, the dining room was identical. The chandelier, the polished silverware, the art that probably cost more than my first year's revenue. But the atmosphere was different. The air used to feel heavy. Now it just felt expensive. And then she appeared. Her, the girl who had once been my world, my heartbreak, my unintentional muse. She looked stunning, of course. Same effortless elegance, same calm smile, but her eyes widened when she saw me. Just for a moment, the room fell away. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey," I replied, just as softly. Her brother arrived last. The same guy who once smirked at my part-time job now gave me a handshake with both hands. "Boss," he said jokingly, "good to finally see you outside of LinkedIn." Ah, poetic irony, my old friend. Dinner began. The food was exquisite. The wine was aged, and the conversation flowed smoother than before. Her father talked about potential collaboration, about modernizing their retail branch and leveraging digital platforms. He was careful with his words now, polite in a way that hinted at respect, perhaps even pride. I listened, nodded, contributed ideas. I even made a few jokes, light ones, about the tech world, not the past. But somewhere between the second course and dessert, her father leaned back, studying me with a look that was hard to read. "You've really built something remarkable," he said. "I'll admit, I didn't expect this." I smiled, swirling the wine in my glass. Neither did I. Life has a funny way of turning bad dinners into good stories. Her mother chuckled, delicately. "Oh, don't remind me. That first dinner," I raised an eyebrow playfully. "The one where I accidentally failed your unspoken entrance exam." The table burst into laughter, genuine, not forced this time. Even her father smiled. For the rest of the evening, we talked about business, travel, small triumphs, and absurd failures. I kept my tone relaxed, my posture calm, my humor dry. Somewhere in that conversation, I realized I no longer wanted approval. I already had it, mine. When dessert came, she, my ex, caught my gaze across the table. "You've changed," she said quietly. I smiled. I just finally had time to become who I was supposed to be. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was acknowledgement. Two parallel stories that had once crossed and kept moving in their own directions. As dinner ended, her father stood and extended his hand again. "We'll be in touch about the partnership," he said. "And it's good to see you doing well." "Thank you," I said, shaking his hand. "It's good to be well." Outside, the night air was cool, crisp, the kind of quiet you can actually hear. I stood on the same porch where I once felt small, invisible, replaceable. Now, every light, every polished surface reflected a version of me they'd never imagined. My phone buzzed. A message from Rafi. "How's the royal feast?" I texted back. No pitchforks, no judgment, just desert and irony. He sent 3 clapping emojis and a line. Poetic cinema. Driving away from that mansion, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt peaceful, because revenge had quietly melted into redemption. And the best part, I hadn't had to hurt anyone to get here. I'd just outgrown the place where I once begged to fit in. The partnership moved forward, clean, professional, no emotional strings attached. Their family business needed a digital transformation. My company specialized in exactly that. Her father called it a strategic collaboration. I called it karma with a business plan. During the first few meetings, her brother handled most of the communication. He was sharp, efficient, and, to my quiet amusement, occasionally nervous when talking to me. I didn't take advantage of it. I treated him like any other partner, respectfully, firmly, and with just enough humor to keep things human. Once, while reviewing a presentation draft, he sighed and said, "You make this look easy." I smiled. "It's only easy because I've failed at it enough times." He laughed, genuinely. The kind of laugh that bridges old arrogance and new humility. Working with them didn't feel like revenge. It felt like poetry. Every meeting in that same polished office was like rewriting an old script, with better lighting, smarter dialogue, and no melodrama. Still, I'd be lying if I said there weren't moments when old memories nudged their way in. The smell of her family's coffee blend, the framed photo in her father's office, the faint perfume she wore when she visited once for a briefing. She walked in gracefully, as always. But this time, the energy was different, gentler, unguarded. She complimented the presentation I'd just delivered. "You've built something really impressive," she said. "Thank you," I replied. "I've had good teachers, life, mistakes, caffeine." She smiled. "Still funny, and still running late to everything," I added. That earned a small laugh, a familiar one. For a split second, it felt like we were both remembering the same rainy evening years ago. The one where I waited in my old car outside her university gate while she apologized for keeping me late. But we didn't mention it. Some memories are better left untouched, like a fragile photograph in an old drawer. After the meeting, she lingered a bit longer than necessary. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if things had gone differently?" she asked quietly. I looked at her, really looked. Sometimes, I admitted. But then I realized, maybe they went exactly as they should have. She nodded, as if she'd already known that answer. From that day on, something subtle shifted. We weren't rekindling anything, but we were rewriting the ending. One where neither of us was the villain, and both of us had grown into who we needed to be. Weeks rolled into months. The project was a success. Of course it was. We launched their online retail expansion with sleek branding, smart UX, and a campaign tagline that made even her father smile. At the celebration event, her family thanked my team on stage. Her brother introduced me with more warmth than I expected, a visionary leader who turned technology into opportunity, and once gave me my first real job. The audience clapped. Her father clapped. Her mother nodded with genuine appreciation, and for the first time, standing under those stage lights, I didn't feel like a guest in someone else's story. I felt like the author. Afterward, as the crowd thinned, she approached me again. "I'm glad we could work together," she said. "Me too," I replied. No bitterness left, just bandwidth. That made her laugh again, softer this time. "You've always had a way with words. Guess I finally learned when to use them." We stood there for a moment, watching the city lights flicker through the glass walls. The view was breathtaking. Tall towers, busy streets, a hum of life that never really sleeps. She turned to me and said, "You look happy," and I was, not because I'd won, not because I'd proven anyone wrong, but because I'd stopped needing to. As I left the event that night, I didn't feel the urge to look back. The skyline ahead was enough. Later, at home, I poured myself a quiet glass of wine and sat by the window. The city buzzed outside, but inside, everything was still. I thought about her parents, their son, the girl who once told me I'd never fit into their world. Then I smiled, because somehow, I hadn't. I'd built my own instead. And it was beautiful in its own messy, earned way. Success, I learned, doesn't come with a soundtrack. There's no triumphant orchestra swelling in the background, no confetti cannon marking the exact moment you've made it. It just happens quietly. You wake up one day, realize the panic has turned into calm, and that you no longer measure yourself by the people who once doubted you. Life, these days, was a soft hum of meetings, travels, and coffee that didn't taste like survival anymore. My mornings began with sunlight instead of anxiety. My nights ended with gratitude instead of spreadsheets. Still, the universe loves a good twist. A few months after our partnership wrapped up, her father called again, this time, not for business. His voice was different, warmer, slower. "We're having a small dinner," he said, "just family and close friends. You should come." The invitation sounded simple, but I could hear the unspoken words, "You belong now." So I went. Again. This time I arrived not as the outsider or the savior, but as someone at peace with both roles. When I walked into the house, I was greeted by laughter from the kitchen, the clinking of glasses, and the smell of roasted herbs. Not intimidation, just life. Her mother hugged me. "It's so good to see you again," she said. "You've been a blessing to our family." I almost laughed, but the sincerity in her tone stopped me. The same woman who once smiled through disapproval now smiled through respect. Her father was already seated, reading glasses on, a newspaper folded beside his plate. He looked up, waved, and said, "You're early, good habit." I took the seat across from him, feeling something I'd never felt in that house before, comfort. When she entered the room, wearing something casual and light, she smiled, not the rehearsed kind, but the genuine sort that reaches the eyes. "You came," she said. "I never turned down free food," I replied. She laughed, shaking her head. "Still you." Dinner was different this time, less formality, more warmth. Stories were told, jokes traded. Her brother teased me about my CEO handwriting in the signing documents, and her father proudly mentioned my name when talking about the company's new expansion. And for the first time, I saw them not as her family, but as people. Imperfect, proud, loving in their own stubborn ways. After dinner, her father invited me to his study. "I wanted to show you something," he said. On the wall hung a framed photo, one from the company's launch event, the night I gave that speech about innovation and perseverance. Below it was a small plaque, "Partnership built on respect and redemption." I stood there for a moment, quietly absorbing it. He cleared his throat. "You know," he said slowly, "I was wrong about you. About a lot of things." I turned to him, smiling softly. "It's all right. I was wrong too. About needing anyone's approval to be enough." He chuckled, nodding. "Life's funny that way, isn't it?" "Yeah," I said. "It teaches through reruns." As I left his study, I noticed her standing by the hallway, holding 2 cups of tea. She handed me one. "Green tea," she said. "Still your favorite?" "Still," I replied, "though now I have it without panic deadlines." We walked to the porch, the same one where my heart once felt like it was shrinking under judgment. Tonight, the same air carried laughter from inside, the same garden glowed under string lights, and the same moon hung above, but everything felt lighter. She looked up, thoughtful, you know. She said, I used to think success meant having everything perfect, and now I think it's about peace. And maybe forgiveness. I nodded. Peace is underrated. Forgiveness too. She smiled faintly. We were both just kids trying to please our parents. Now we're just adults trying not to turn into them, I said. She laughed again, the same laugh that used to undo me, but this time it didn't hurt, it just belonged to another time. As I left that night, she walked me to my car. Before I opened the door, she said, I'm proud of you. I paused, the words hanging in the cool night air like a gentle melody. Thank you, I said. I'm proud of me too. And that was it. No grand gesture, no second chance at romance, just closure, beautifully wrapped in quiet understanding. Driving home, I realized that the best revenge isn't proving people wrong. It's outgrowing the version of yourself that needed to. Time, as it turns out, doesn't heal everything. It just changes the texture of pain, softens the edges, replaces bitterness with memory, and folds everything into a quieter kind of gratitude. A year passed after that dinner. Life kept moving. New projects, new employees, new markets to chase. I stopped checking their families' social media, stopped wondering who they were hosting or whether she ever thought about me, not because I didn't care, but because I no longer needed the echo. My company grew faster than I'd planned. We opened an office in another city. I hired people who reminded me of my younger self, eager, anxious, convinced they had to prove their worth. Sometimes, I'd see that familiar flicker of self-doubt in their eyes during meetings, and I'd smile gently. You're already enough, I'd tell them. You just haven't realized it yet. I guess that's what healing looks like, turning your old wounds into someone else's roadmap. One day, while sorting through old emails, I found a message from her brother. Hey boss, just wanted to say thanks again. You changed more than just the company, you changed us. Attached was a photo of their new store opening. Brighter, more modern, staffed with younger people smiling proudly. And there it was, tucked in the background, a framed poster of our collaboration campaign. The one that read, Rebuilt from the inside out. I laughed softly. Maybe that was true for all of us. That evening, I went back to my old neighborhood, not for nostalgia, just curiosity. The streets looked smaller. The grocery shop where I used to buy instant noodles had turned into a cafe with minimalist decor and overpriced latte. Progress, I guess. I ordered one anyway, sat by the window, sipping slowly, watching the same kind of kid I once was rush by, backpack slipping, hair messy, eyes full of restless ambition. I wanted to tell him, it's going to hurt, people will laugh, but you'll build something from it. Of course, he wouldn't believe me. I wouldn't have believed me either. Later that night, I stopped by the park near my old apartment, the same bench where I used to dream about proving them wrong. It was still there, older, faded, but solid. I sat down, leaned back, and realized something simple yet profound. The story wasn't about revenge anymore. It never really was. It was about resilience, about refusing to let someone else's definition of enough become your ceiling, about working quietly until your worth stops being a debate. As the city lights flickered on, I thought of her, of the look in her eyes the last time we spoke, the unspoken peace between us. Maybe she'd found her own version of enough too. The night breeze brushed against my face. Somewhere nearby, a street musician played a slow tune on a guitar, off-key but honest. I smiled. Maybe that's what life really is. Not perfect melodies, but imperfect ones played with heart. I stayed there a while longer, watching the stars fade into city glow. My phone buzzed. A message from Rafi again. Still awake, boss? Or philosophizing under the moonlight again? I texted back, both. The universe sends good material after 10 p.m. He replied with a laughing emoji and a quote he knew I loved. Some stories don't end, they just change narrators. And he was right, because now, when people tell me I wasn't good enough for their family, I just smile and think, no, I was never meant to fit in. I was meant to build something worth belonging to. And that's exactly what I did. The world doesn't need you to be perfect. It just needs you to keep showing up. One scar, one lesson, one quiet victory at a time. And maybe, if you're lucky, one day the people who once doubted you will call, not to question your worth, but to thank you for proving what was possible. That's not revenge. That's grace. So now, as the lights dim and the story exhales, let's slow everything down. Picture yourself leaning back, the hum of the world softening around you. The noise of ambition fades to a distant whisper. Only the rhythm of your breathing remains. You're here, safe, steady, enough. The memories, the pressure, the long nights, they dissolve like mist in morning light. You can feel the calm settling into your shoulders, the warmth of quiet pride spreading through your chest. All those years of running, chasing, proving, they've brought you here, to this gentle pause between what was and what will be. Imagine the city outside, lights blinking like sleepy constellations. Somewhere laughter echoes faintly, and the air smells faintly of rain. You take a slow breath, and with it comes peace, the kind that doesn't demand applause. You've built something beautiful, not out of anger, but out of endurance. You've learned that silence can be stronger than revenge, and that being enough doesn't require anyone's permission. Now, let it go. The judgments, the old voices, the ghosts of comparison, they can rest now. You've earned your quiet. Close your eyes. Feel the story fade, word by word, until all that's left is a whisper. You are always enough. And with that, the night closes softly around you.